of Orthodox spirituality.
Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou Lekea.
Lord have mercy, 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 Lord have mercy.
Lord have mercy, 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 Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy.
Hello, dear listeners. We are continuing to read from the book With Pain and Love for Contemporary Man, the first volume in the series Spiritual Counsels by Saint Paisios.
O Lord, I have cried out unto Thee. Hear Thou me.
A priest has great responsibility. A priest can never shut his door to people. He has great responsibility. Some are desperate, others are sick and in need. Some are dying. Some he must receive when they visit, others he must visit. A priest cannot deny help. Souls are in danger. He must help them. If he does not, and God takes them unprepared, whose responsibility will it be? Will it not be the priest's? I am a monastic. I can shut my door and even leave for the desert or disappear. But I will still be able to help people quietly with my prayers. You see, my job is not to solve the problems that people bring to me, but to pray for them. That's why I did not become a priest or a spiritual father. I wanted to help people in a different way. If I lived in the world as a priest, I would not be able to shut my door. I would have to respond to all kinds of needs at all times of the day and help everybody without discrimination, no matter what their situation. I would need to take care of my parishioners first, and then devote whatever time was left to other people who sought my help. I would then be interested not just in the faithful, but also in those who had no faith, atheists, and even enemies of the church. Or if I were a spiritual father and someone came to me and accused another person, I would have to get the two of them together and to try to figure out what was going on. I would need to pick up the phone and find out how a person was doing who had a temptation, or check with someone else who faced this or that problem, and so on. How could I ever have quiet time to myself? A priest must lead the way so that the faithful may follow. You see, in a flock, the ram always leads the way and the sheep follow. When its horns are turned right, the entire flock goes in that direction. The sheep follow the ram, their leader. This is why sheep never move alone. They follow each other closely, one behind the other. The ram knows the right direction. The sheep go wherever the ram goes. Yeroda, is a priest or an abbot or anybody with pastoral duties justified in loving a good and kind soul more than one that is always difficult and demanding? Say, for example, that you are a shepherd and have a large flock. Some of your lambs are grazing and bleating away contentedly, while others are sickly or have leeches on them and move to the edge of the field. Which ones would you care for the most? Wouldn't it be the sickly ones? Or suppose that a jackal attacks them, and they start crying. Aren't you going to leave the ones that are quietly grazing and bleeding, and rush to those that are being attacked and are crying? A shepherd gives more care to the sick and injured lambs. He takes care of them until they recover. We must do the same. Whether our sheep are performing miracles or have been wounded by our enemy the devil, we must have the same place in our hearts for all. We should not have scorn in our hearts for those who fall. In my life, I have felt much more love and pain and have been more concerned for those who have had a difficult life and struggle to overcome their passions than for those who have already overcome them. Where there is interior love, the other person knows it, because love makes us look sweet, and divine grace makes us beautiful, and its radiance is difficult to hide. Pastors, whether they are priests or bishops, would do well to remember Moses and what he went through with his 2 million grumbling people. He prayed so much for his people and suffered along with them, wandering for years in the desert until God led them to the promised land. If pastors remember Moses, they will realize how few their troubles are compared to his. They will take courage and not complain.
O Lord, who should stand? But with thee there is forgiveness, that thou mayest be feared.
Because of thy name have I waited for thee, O Lord. My soul hath waited upon thy word. My soul hath hoped in the Lord.
The secularization of the clergy. Yeroda, during the summer months when it gets really hot, is it still necessary for the ecclesiastikos to serve in the church wearing the mantle? Ecclesiastikos is the monk or nun who is in charge of church maintenance and who assists during church services. I am having such a hard time in the heat. Oh, the state of monastic life these days. What can I say? Saint Athanasius the Athonite wore a thick garment and a very heavy cross as part of his ascetic discipline. And look at us today. When I was in Australia, I even saw a sacristan in shorts. This is perfect for the beach, I told him. He replied, it makes it easier to walk and move around. They begin this way, and slowly they get to the point where they say, let's get rid of our black cassocks. They're so hot in the sun. Is the mantle in your way? Throw it away. Is your headscarf a nuisance because it makes you sweat? Get rid of it. This is where we are heading. Listen, my child, isn't it better if we each find a way to solve this problem? If you are hot, wear fewer clothes underneath. Yeroda, should someone take off the cassock and wear only the mantle? And the priest then should remove their under cassock, anderi, and wear only their trousers? Now what am I supposed to say? The mantle is the proper garment of the monk. It is granted to all newly tonsured monks, Stavrophori, as well as to those who bear the great schema. During the tonsuring, the mantle is worn by the sponsoring senior monk, who after vesting the new monk with the cassock, removes his mantle and places it upon him. I was really impressed by the fact that some women in Alexandria, Egypt, where it gets very hot, still keep their tradition and dress in black. And yet we find it hard to bear the cassock, which has been bequeathed to us by our fathers? Yeroda, there is this expression, is it really the cassock that makes the priest? Well, think of 2 olive trees, one with leaves and the other without. Which one of the 2 do you prefer? Once when I was at the Kalivi of the Holy Cross, I peeled the trunk of an olive tree and wrote this on it. The trees got rid of their garments, stoli. It's time to see the fruits of their labor, prokopi. Next to that I wrote, a priest without his cassock, arasotos, is a priest without redemption, asotos. At that time there was a lot of discussion about doing away with cassocks, so some priests who were for the change would come to see me to get my blessing. Yeroda, someone brought an Orthodox priest wearing only trousers without his cassock to the monastery. Should we have asked for his blessing? What blessing? You should have told the person who brought him, no matter how important he was, forgive us, but it is a rule in our monastery to give cassocks to priests who are not wearing one. To have a priest come to an Orthodox women's monastery wearing only his trousers, that's inappropriate. When the person who brought him has no shame, and when the priest himself is not ashamed for having come without his cassock, why should you be embarrassed to ask him to put one on? I once met a young archimandrite wearing layman's clothing at the airport. He was going abroad and introduced himself. "I am Father so-and-so," he said. "Where's your cassock?" was my answer. Of course, I did not prostrate in front of him. Yaroda, some people claim that a modernized clergy will be better able to help people. When Patriarch Demetrius visited the Seminary of the Holy Cross in the United States, a few pious American students went up to him and said, "Your Holiness, don't you think it's time for our clergy to be more up to date?" The Patriarch's response was, "St. Cosmas said that when the clergy turn into laymen, laymen will turn into demons." Wasn't that a good answer? Then they prepared this luxurious suite for him with a fancy bed and so on. The moment he saw it, he said, "Is this where I am supposed to stay, in this room? You'd better bring me a simple cot." When a clergyman becomes worldly, he becomes the devil's candidate. Yaroda, should we make sacred vestments a little simpler? Are we harming priests by making ornate and embroidered vestments for them? The honorable thing for you to say in such circumstances is, "The vestments we make are usually very simple. We could easily put on more embroidery, but we avoid it because we are troubled by the thought that when people see it, they will be scandalized." Of course, those who have no faith take advantage of the situation, as we hear them say, "We have no bread to eat, but the priests have all kinds of fancy vestments." If you make simple vestments, you will draw those priests who are dedicated. But if you get priests with a worldly taste, the ornate vestments will be an embarrassment for you and for them. It is appropriate to put more embroidery on the covers of the holy altar, holy table, and the holy gifts. But you should avoid placing crosses too low on the sticharia and the felonia. Try putting something symbolic there. We have priests sitting on the faces of the saints on crosses. This is disrespectful. Which of you convicts me of scandal? Yaroda, does a priest who has committed a mortal sin lose divine grace? No, how could it be lost? Divine grace may depart from a priest, but it cannot be lost. If a priest is suspended from his duties, he retains the priesthood, but the mysteries are no longer activated through him. The priest has no power. The most important thing is grace. If grace is reinstated, then the mysteries will be valid. Much discernment is needed on the issue of priests who must be prevented from serving divine liturgy. We must be careful to avoid unnecessary measures and sanctions that will scandalize the faithful and the priest's family. If he must cease celebrating the divine liturgy, the suspension should take place discreetly to avoid causing more harm than good to the faithful. Whatever the issues he might have are known to him and to God. But if he is suspended immediately, the faithful and his family will start wondering why, and the damage will be greater. I know that sometimes God allows for pious clerics with problems to suffer various ailments, a bleeding nose, a stomach ache, and so on, and thus to be prevented from celebrating the liturgy. In this same way, those priests who have some issues can find some peace since they have to stop celebrating the liturgy. Sometimes a priest who faces difficulties of this kind will come to my Kalivi. I can see right away that the poor soul must stop officiating the divine mysteries. But sometimes his bishop happens to be of a different opinion. What can you say then? You only pray that God intervenes. Once, I remember, I had talked to a priest and convinced him that he should stop. But then, when he told this to his spiritual father and his bishop, they disagreed. So he remained an active priest despite his problem. Sometime later, he was struck by a car while walking on the sidewalk. The car jumped the curb and left him dead on the spot. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Hebrews 10, verse 31. Our Orthodox Church is not in any way defective. Whatever flaws there might be are caused by us, both hierarchs and laymen, when we misrepresent the Church. We may have only a few exceptional priests, but this is not a reason for concern. The Church is the Church of Christ. He is the one who governs her. The Church is not a temple built with stones, sand, and mortar by the faithful and burned down by barbarians. The Church is Christ himself. And whosoever shall fall on this stone shall be broken, but on whomsoever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder. Matthew 21, verse 44. Christ is tolerating the present state of things. He tolerates, and divine grace acts for the sake of our people. This is only a storm. Things will not stay this way. They will clear up. Don't you see what it says in the Gospel? A bruised reed he will not break, and a dimly burning wick he will not quench, until he brings forth justice to victory. Compare Isaiah 42, verse 3, Matthew 12, verse 20. Christ said this so that we will have no excuse on Judgment Day. When the oil lamp is running out of oil, and there's only a little oil left in the wick, it may flicker for a while, but in the end it will go out. It is like the last flashes of life in a dying person. But Christ does not want to blow on it and put it out, because then it might protest. Until you blew on me and put me out, I was burning so bright. What do you mean, I put you out? There was no oil in you to begin with. And he will not touch the bruised reed either, because then it will protest. You touched me, and I broke into pieces. How can you say that I touched you, and that's why you broke, when you were already cracked and bound to break on your own? When we, the monastics, as well as the clergy, do not live according to the gospel, we strew unholy seeds, we strew unbelief. The world is in need of our virtues, not of our vices. It is the example set by monks more than anything else that can make a difference in the lives of lay people who are looking for all kinds of excuses to justify their sins. We must be very careful. You see, we cannot say what Christ said, "Which of you convicts me of sin?" John 8, verse 46. But what we can say is, "Which of you convicts me of scandal?" Christ said this because he is perfect God and perfect man. We, on the other hand, are only human. We have flaws. We fall all the time. That is how things are. But we should not become a cause of scandal to others. A general once said to me, "If my mother had not put the Orthodox faith in me from an early age, I would have lost it altogether when I went to Cyprus during the hostilities." Can you imagine a man, a member of the church, yelling on the phone, "Slaughter the Turks," for no apparent reason? The order issued and passed on to him was exactly the opposite. No Turks are to be harmed. Many of the refugees who came to Greece in 1924 from Pharasa in Asia Minor had the same problem. They saw in Greece many priests and bishops who had no piety, so they were easily misled by certain heresies that had appeared at that time. They saw people in the church who did not live a spiritual life, and they were scandalized. Their experience had been otherwise in Pharasa. When the evangelicals showed up proclaiming, "We live according to the gospel," the poor souls were misled. But when a bishop, priest, or monk is at fault, it is not right to blame Christ. And yet that's what people do. Isn't he a representative of Christ, they ask? Yes, but is Christ pleased with this man? Do they even consider what awaits these representatives in the next life? You see, people who are scandalized by problems in the church end up losing their faith because they do not realize that blaming the church for the mistakes of one priest is like blaming the government for the mistakes of one policeman. Those who have good dispositions will appreciate this point when it is explained to them. They have an excuse because no one helped them, and they remained uninformed about some things. Yaroda, how come no one comes forward to denounce all these church scandals? It is not possible to take a position on all ecclesiastical matters. There are situations that make this very difficult. It is even possible that one will patiently tolerate a situation until God shows him the right course of action. It is one thing to tolerate a situation, and another to accept it when one should not. When we run into such problems, it's important that we speak with respect and with courage, instead of issuing insults and going public with our disdain. It is best that we talk privately to the person at fault, with love and compassion, and draw his attention to certain things. Neither a person who aggressively declares the truth face to face, nor one who publicizes it is sincere or responsible. Rather, only a person who has love, a truly spiritual life, and who speaks with discernment when appropriate will say what must be said at the right time. Those who indiscreetly criticize others have malice and are in deep spiritual darkness because, unfortunately, they look at others as if they were blockheads. While they mercilessly hew others down, making them suffer, these people are thrilled at the prospect of setting others straight. Only in one who truly has a demon with such behavior, the public exposing of other sins and the revealing of their past be justifiable. However, this is only true in those cases where the demon has rights over those whose sins are revealed and he is trying to shatter their weak souls. It's natural for an unclean spirit to reveal the vices of people, but never their virtues. But those who have been freed from their passions, since they have no malice left in them, correct evil with goodness. If they see dirt that is difficult to remove, they will go and place a cover on it, so that those who see it may not be repulsed. By contrast, those who spend their time poking through garbage are like chickens. Nowadays, this was said in 1974, the devil is putting smudges on everything he can find and spreading confusion everywhere. But in the end, he will fall on his face. The time will come when the righteous will shine for all to see. They may have little in the way of virtue, but it will be so dark in the world that others will see the light and turn to them for help. If those people are still alive, who today are causing all these scandals, they will feel great shame.
My name, for I know thee to be an inexhaustible treasure of unfailing healing, so only a blameless one.
Confronting ecclesiastical issues. Yaroda, what is the right way to confront difficult ecclesiastical issues? We must avoid extremes. Extreme solutions will never solve a problem. In the old days, the grocer would add little by little with the scoop on the scale until he got the exact weight and the scales were balanced. In other words, he did not add or remove large amounts abruptly. Extreme positions always cause suffering for our mother, the Church, as well as for those who hold those positions, because an extreme stance has a way of nailing people into place. It's like having a possessed person full of spiritual insolence and contempt for everything, pulling on one end, and a narrow-minded fool, zealous in his ignorance, pulling on the other. This is a confrontation, in other words, between a foolish zealot and a man steeped in spiritual arrogance. The two bicker and strike at each other, never agreeing, because what is missing from both is divine grace. And the worst that can happen, God forbid, is that there will be no end to their bickering. Each side will keep on striking the other, back and forth, without end. But those who can take the two sides, bend them, and bring them together, help them come to an agreement, will be crowned by Christ with two unfading crowns. We must be careful not to create problems in the church or to magnify the small indiscretions that take place here and there, because this only makes things worse and gives pleasure to the devil. The person who gets overly upset and angry at the sight of a minor mistake and rushes head-on, supposedly to put things in order, resembles the foolish sacristan who sees a candle dripping during worship and rushes head-on to put it out, knocking over people and candle stands in his way and causing an even greater disorder. Unfortunately, we have so many people keen on disturbing our Mother the Church these days. The educated among them have grasped dogma with their minds only, rather than with the spirit of the Holy Fathers. The uneducated have grasped the dogmas with their teeth, which is why you hear a lot of grinding when they discuss ecclesiastical matters. As a result, they both cause greater harm to the Church than the enemies of our Orthodox faith. It is good if a river's current is not strong, because strong currents sweep away logs, rocks, even people. But a slow, shallow river is not good either. It's a breeding ground for mosquitoes. Then there are those who spend their time criticizing each other instead of working for the common good. Instead of keeping watch over themselves, they look for mistakes in others. They are on the lookout for what others say or write, just to strike mercilessly at them. However, these same merciless people claim that if they were to speak or write about the same exact topic, they, of course, would have used a great many references from sacred scripture and the fathers to support their work. These people cause great harm because on the one hand, they do injustice to their brothers and sisters, and on the other hand, they undermine them before the faithful. In fact, many times they sow unbelief in weak souls because they scandalize them. Those who justify their malice on their supposed rightful inspection of others instead of themselves, or by publishing ecclesiastical issues, even those matters too sensitive to discuss, on the pretext of tell it to the church, should begin first with their own little church, their own family, or their own brotherhood. If that appears to be in good order, then they can go ahead and ridicule the Mother, the Church. Good children, I believe, never make accusations against their mother. Everyone is necessary in the Church. Everyone offers his services to her, no matter what his character is, mild or strict. The body of the Church is like the human body, just as we need both sweet and sour foods, even bitter herbs, because each food has something to contribute in vitamins and other nutrients. So, too, for the body of the Church, every one of us is indispensable. Each person complements the character of the other, and all of us are obliged to tolerate not only the spiritual temperament of others, but also their human weaknesses. Now, unfortunately, there are those who have irrational expectations from other people. They expect everyone to have the same spiritual temperament as their own, and if others do not coincide with their personalities, if they are a bit more lenient or more severe, they immediately conclude that they are not spiritual people.
I know thee as the protection of my life and most safe fortification, O Virgin.
Dear listeners, thank you for listening. Our time is up. We will continue once again where we left off in our next show. Until then, be well.
From corruption of passions deliver me.
Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have
Readings of Orthodox Spirituality.
Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou Lekea.